Hello humans, Artist with a Fro here, and welcome back to the show. We are here with round 4 of the A to Z Yugituber tournament, and we are currently facing up against Team NDL with our UA deck. Now, as a result of us losing the round 3 to Bean Soldier, we are currently continuing on throughout the losers bracket in hopes to potentially get back onto the regular bracket, potentially for the finals. So with the UAs, I've noticed a lot of special summoning requirements that are insanely necessary, as well as a under-reliance on the extra deck. With that being said, it means that having extra cards that allow me to then draw, or rather having extra draw potential, is mainly going to come from me forfeiting or not necessarily using cards from my extra deck. There is a lot of really good search potential, but again, one of the other things that I've realized is that without Signing Deal or the Hyper Stadium that I do have in my hand, which I just activated, or without Libero Spiker or Midfielder, there really isn't a way to get the combo started if you don't have those level 4 monsters. Now thankfully they are all warriors, so they are searchable with Reinforcement of the Army. However, it does pose the sort of potential threat where if you do draw a hand primarily of higher level cards, you are essentially on the sort of short end of the stick in regards to getting your combo started. Thankfully though, like I mentioned before, they do have a plethora of searches, including Hyper Stadium, Signing Deal, and Reinforcement of the Army. So you're essentially going to get one of the 3 to your hand easily without having to worry too much if you are going to draw them. But I do recommend running 3 Hyper Stadiums, running 3 Signing Deals, even though again, of course, that you will eventually sort of have the drawback from that with the added effect of you using your life points in order to sign one of your UA monsters. Now, thankfully for this turn, I'm able to get out Libero Spiker and Playing Manager. However, Playing Manager is much better off in my hand instead of having him on the field. However, I do have Perfect Ace and Blockbacker. Both 2 cards do have really good control potential. So essentially, I can either choose to summon out either one of them and just sort of wait it out in order to see what my opponent is able to do. One other thing that I've noticed is that UAs technically tend to have more higher defense than they do attack, especially for some of the more odd cards like Blockbacker. I understand, but Perfect Ace, I'm like, if you're a pitcher, wouldn't that make more sense for you to have higher attack? Or I don't know, that's just my sort of assumption in regards to the actual image of the art, the character it's intending to portray, so on and so forth. So Team NDL summons out his Edge Imp Sabers, and this makes me believe that he's using the letter F. I believe that in this duel it was Frightfurs that we were up against, and it's going to be a very interesting sort of play style in regards to how this deck does in comparison to the others. One thing that we've noticed is that when we're using two or more rogue decks, it's often interesting to see which one has gotten the most recent support, and then that deck is more than most likely to essentially win the duel eventually. So since he has his Edge Imp Sabers out on the field, he of course is going to go into the attack, thus running into my Libero Spiker. Thankfully though, we aren't going to take any damage, and instead he is going to send Edge Imp Sabers to the graveyard. Now that is going to activate its effect, although I can chain it for the sort of cost of Perfect Ace. However, it's not essential, or it's not necessarily recommended to do so, so I just let it rock. Now I do still have the 2 monsters on the field, and thanks to Dark Ruler No More, like I mentioned before, I am not going to take damage this turn. Unfortunately though, they are unable to use their effects, so it doesn't really give me enough of an option in order to set up ourselves for the next turn. I need to at least either have Libero Spiker or Perfect Ace, or both of them survive this turn, in order for me to actually move forward with the next possible turn and potentially go for sort of game. Now, we're essentially waiting to see what he is planning to do. I think that the destruction of Edge Imp Sabers was not something that he was looking forward to. However, he does go into his main phase 2. Now, he doesn't have any monsters on the field, so I was kind of worried that he would have evenly matched. However, thankfully, he does not, and this then allows us to have, or rather draw, our Lucio / midfielder and potentially go for game. Now, all I really need to do at this point is just summon out a monster. I am going to activate Pot of Extravagance to hopefully get another card that could potentially give me a little bit more boost of attack. I don't get anything with the exception of Signing Deal, so that will allow me to get another summon. But looking at this field right now, all I really need to do is just summon out midfielder, go for Perfect Ace, maybe activate Signing Deal, and then get another monster. So at this point, we're kind of just chatting. It's just like, yeah, this is kind of game. It's unfortunate when your opponent does get a brick, but it does happen. And in my opinion, I think that it happens a lot more often when it comes to online dueling services. But that's just my little conspiracy theory, right? I think that Nexus, EDO, etc. all have their own kind of algorithm when it comes to you playing specific decks that essentially need, you know, the card when you need it, or work around drawing specific cards. But nonetheless, we end up summoning out midfielder, which then allows us to also get out Perfect Ace. That also allows us to get Playing Manager. We have Perfect Ace in defense position. We don't necessarily need to activate Playing Manager's effect. I believe that this is more than enough for game. He does have 7,400 with 18, 2,000, 15, and then 12. I can essentially go for that, but instead I'm going to summon out Heraldic Champion Excalibur, or Heroic Champion Excalibur, and that will essentially give me 4,000 attack points instead of the previously mentioned, what is that? That would have been 38 plus 12. That would have been about 5. And then plus the extra 12 would have been 62. So never mind, that actually wouldn't have been enough. So with the 4,000, I should be able to go for it. I think if I do activate Signing Deal this turn, then that'll just be an additional summon, which I will go for. And I'll eventually take them or bite the bullet for this just to hopefully get out another card. Now I am still learning the UAs at this point, so I'm just kind of like surveying, looking at midfielder, trying to decide what I'm going to summon with all of these cards. But this is going to let me get out one of the UA monsters for the cost of taking 300 damage equal to the monster's stars, or levels for that matter. Now with that, summoning out Dunker, this is pretty much the, Rebounder, this is pretty much the end of the duel. I am going to still go for Heroic Champion, just to have an additional point of damage, but rather not necessarily unfortunately, but fortunate for us, Team NDL does forfeit the match, or rather the round. So we end up going into round 2, and I'm considering what I may or may not try to side in. I didn't really see a lot of trap presence, so I think that for my sake, it's important for me to take out Royal Decree when it is not needed, and then switch it out for something that I could use necessarily as a hand trap if he does intend on wiping my field. I also have this tendency to take out Foolish Burial Grounds, one of the cards which I think is really good, but doesn't need to be run at 3 for UAs. I think that yes, you definitely need to get your penalty boxes in the graveyard, as well as potentially having a power jersey, but other than that, it's like you don't need to always send them to the grave if you are going to hopefully or potentially use them. Now looking at this hand, this is probably one of the best hands that I could have asked for. We do have Reinforcement of the Army as well as Libero Spiker. Anytime you start with Libero Spiker, that's pretty much the best type of hand that you want to have. So looking at this, we also do have some hand, or rather draw prevention with Ash Blossom. And I think at this point, I'm kind of just formulating or trying to think about like, wait, am I going first? Is he going first? And then I realize, oh, I'm going first. So we start off first by activating Reinforcement of the Army. And after that, I am going to essentially, I believe, normal summon my Libero Spiker. I think it's always best to have Libero on the field, even if you do have Playing Manager in your hand, which is not necessarily the thing that you always want to have. Having that been said, I think that if I do summon out midfielder, then the only extra added effect that I would have, or rather the reason why I'm not summoning out midfielder, is because of his added effect, because you need to have more than one UA on the field in order to activate it. So if I do summon him, I'm essentially going to switch him out and then just sit on top of either Playing Manager or Libero in order to just sort of just save the turn. Thankfully though, summoning out midfielder does allow me to get another card, and this is where I can kind of use the fact that I do have Playing Manager in my hand to my advantage. If during his turn he does get a card that is able to sort of circumvent my entire tactic, midfielder will then actually send Playing Manager back to my hand, and I'll be able to summon out Libero Spiker. I can then chain Libero Spiker's effect to then send Playing Manager back into the deck to summon another card out from the deck. Now again, like I mentioned before, it's always good to really have Playing Manager as the card that you summon with Libero Spiker's effect, but unfortunately that isn't sort of the turn that we were given, or rather the hand that we were given. Thankfully though, we do have the Ash Blossom, which we are able to stop his Fright for Patchwork. He ends up going for Fluffle Dolphin, and then I believe he's going to try to go in for the battle phase. Now this is going to be where we're going to have to end up using our penalty box, and this is, I think, was the start of me realizing how broken of a card penalty box is. First off, it doesn't target, and then the second thing that it does is that it banishes the card that is battling the UA monster for 2 end phases. So you're essentially able to get rid of a monster without having to worry about it having a non-target effect. So essentially, with penalty box, I can banish the card, but we also do activate Midfielder's effect to then send Playing Manager back to the hand to then get out Libero Spiker. That way, if he does go for something else, we can then send Playing Manager into the deck and then summon another card, which will then return Libero Spiker back to our hand so we can summon him out again. He still goes for the attack, even though Penalty Box is on the field. We are going to activate Penalty Box's effect. I don't need to chain Playing Manager to do anything else at this point. So we are just really just waiting in order to get another UA card or to have another UA monster on our field that we can go into. I'm not going to activate it because, again, like I said before, Playing Manager is much better off in my hand while I do have Libero Spiker, and we end up drawing another Libero Spiker, so I believe that this could be another set of game. If I do summon out Heroic Champion, we can then essentially just exceed them, have the attack for 4,000, then go in for the additional sort of 2,000 and then 1,500, or 2,000 and then 1,800, which I think is a lot more closer to game based off of what we could potentially do. Now, it also is to be said that you are, or rather it's more, I would say, recommended to run higher rank 4s or some better rank 4s. We do have Time Thief Redoer and Alomiris, although I should have replaced Alomiris with Rafflesia. I think we definitely need to have Utopia, of course, Honor Arc, etc., etc. I think I really put in some of the other cards just because they were just Link 2s instead of them being anything other than that. However, we do have Blade Armor Ninja, which I will thankfully be able to use for this turn. He will then be able to attack for 4,400, which will then allow us to then finish this man off with the additional 20, or rather with the additional 2,000 and 1,800, which will allow us to go for game. So the 4,400 attack then completes. I'll then attack with Libero Spiker afterwards, and then we are going to go for game with Playing Manager. Now, again, we are moving through the losers round, so it is going to be contingent on whether or not we make it further enough in order for us to challenge the finals. I do want to thank Team NDL for engaging us in this duel. Please make sure that you give them a shout out. Please make sure that you check them out and subscribe to their YouTube channel, as well as checking them out on all other forms of social media. Again, as well, big shout out to CypherCards for coordinating and formulating this entire tournament event. Stay tuned for more duels. And with that being said, I've been the artist with the fro, and that, my friends, is the show. Thank you all for watching.